guys. Welcome back for another episode of Evolve. I am your host, Monette Brann-Natta, and I am so happy to have you back sharing some energy with me today. We are wrapping up our month of love. We had a beautiful month of love. We explored love of many facets and areas. We had interesting guests. We had polarizing guests. We had a discussion, and that's one of my favorite things to have. Over the last 4 weeks, we've really gone in and examined all of those aspects. We talked about Fallujah, the love of self first, and then we talked about pragma, long-standing love, when you are with a partner for many years and you guys develop and stand in love together. And then we talked about eros, that fun love, that attraction, the sexual energy that happens in the beginning of a relationship that helps bond and glue us. Now this week, we're going to talk about storge or storge, if you want to pronounce it in the proper Greek way. I did look it up, guys. And so I'm going to say storge. Either way, it is about the love of children. And the definition of storge is this. It's empathy, a bond. It is liking someone through fondness of familiarity, family members, or people who relate in familiar ways that have otherwise found themselves bonded by chance. An example is the natural love and affection that a parent might have for a child. That second to last sentence caught me. Family members or people who relate in familiar ways and have otherwise found themselves bonded by chance. Bonded by chance. My guest today found herself bonded by chance. She asked questions of the universe and her loved ones when she felt it was right in her spirit. She followed through. At the time she made the shift, she was busily occupied in the bustling food service industry at Duck Key's famous luxury Hawks Cay Resort. But she wanted more. So she trusted Source and her intuition and was led into the opportunity of her life up until that time. When she took the position of the youth activities coordinator, Terry said that she never imagined that it would be one of the most rewarding experiences of her life. Beautiful lessons were learned, and her heart was given to the children that grew up in my town. My guest today is a hometown hero. She is my hometown hero. She swept into Eastwind and implemented positive change. People were kinder when Terry was part of our lives. And the place where we just once existed and lived in transformed into a community. We smiled more at each other. We spoke more to each other, and we worked out our differences, all under her benevolent tutelage. She touched my life and the life of those around me, and she did so selflessly. She did so with a genuine colorblindness that struck me as authentic and pure, even as a child. She gave her smile, spirit, and boundless energy, and I, along with many others, will be forever grateful. Today, Terry is a successful realtor with 3 children, 1 grandson, and 1 beautiful granddaughter on the way, and yet she has made the time in her schedule to share some of her awesome energy and insights with us, and I am so honored, and when I say that, I mean it, so honored to have you here with me today, Terry. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. The honor is mine, really.
I'm so excited to have you here. There are so many things that I've wanted to talk to you about. When you were growing up, you have people that are in your life that make an impact. And you, for me, were certainly one of those people. And so I wanted to just start off by saying this. The Keys are an incredibly vibrant and colorful place, and they attract a lot of people and visitors that end up making it their home. They take up residence there. What brought you to the Keys, Terry, and what did you do when you got to the Keys?
Well, anybody who's been to the Keys can say that it's a pretty easy place to take up residence once you get there.
Yes.
I grew up in a small town in Maine, and I had been working in Bar Harbor, Maine, waiting tables in the summers. And I met some people there who said to me, why don't you give the Keys a try? That's what we do in the wintertime. So I said, okay. They weren't going that year, so I struck out on my own with a friend who drove 1,800 miles with me. He then returned back to Maine and left me there to find a job, which I quickly did find a couple of jobs, and then decided to go with the job that I was offered at Hawks K. So that's what I did. I knew I was I knew I had landed in paradise, and I loved it.
Well, first I want to say that's an incredible friend. 1,800 miles just to drop you off. That's
right.
An incredible friend.
Right.
And I wanted to know, how did you go from working at Hawks K Resort, which is beautiful, guys. If you've never been to the Keys, please check us out in the Keys. I say us because I'm still a Keys girl at heart. But how did you go from working in resorts to working with children?
Well, when I thought about this question a bit, and I was at the time in my mid-20s, figuring out adulting, and had a conversation with my mom, who was back here in Maine, and I think she thought I was maybe in a little bit of a funk, and she suggested to me maybe I should go volunteer. So I did. Take your parents' suggestions, kids. I did. I called the captain of the DARE program because immediately I thought, well, why don't I do something with kids and staying off drugs? And she told me at the time, no, you need to be law enforcement to work with me, but why don't you go next door to our local teen center? They're always looking for volunteers. So I did that, and I worked there for about a year in a volunteer capacity with some kids. And from there I was recommended for this job that the Key West Housing Authority was starting at Eastwind, and that's how I ended up in your complex.
All right. And what was the purpose and objective of the program, as well as your job title when you were at Eastwind?
I was the youth activities coordinator, and the plan was that I was supposed to create activities so that the kids in Eastwind would have something positive to do rather than get into trouble or get onto drugs. And that was made available by a grant that they had written. It was a part-time job at the time, but it quickly became full-time.
Okay. And how long did it take for you to kind of figure out that fate had really landed you in the right place?
Well, at first, my job was to go in and kind of try to create some excitement. There was going to be a big meeting where we were going to introduce to everybody this new program that we were going to roll out. And so I had to create the program. And I quickly met a few kids and a younger man in the development who helped me make some bright-colored posters. So we would go out and we would put them all around, and I would talk to a couple of kids. And the initial meeting finally happened, and I didn't know. I was still kind of unsure. I didn't know if anybody was going to show up. And I think at that first meeting we needed to have 12 enrolled in the program for the grant to be good. And I think we had around 35 and eventually 50.
Oh, that's all.
That's all. So as soon as the kids showed up, I think it took less than 3 minutes to know that I was in the right place. I loved it instantly. I loved them instantly.
And I will be a testament for the kids that may be listening. I was one of those kids, and we loved you instantly. We just loved you instantly. You were really like an angel. As I was preparing for this interview and thinking about things, and we were speaking, I noticed that you always refer to the place where I lived as Eastwind. And for the listeners, the nickname of the place that I grew up was The Projects. And that same kind of humane energy is one of the things that I remember about you, Terry, as a child. You always brought that. You humanized a group of people that sometimes didn't have a great reputation. And it wasn't so much because we were bad kids. We were kids just like everyone else. And I traveled in multiple circles in the town. So kids that were affluent were just like the kids that were in the projects, except the kids on the other side may not have known that, and because it just wasn't their experience. But I noticed that you treated us in a loving way. And I have always wondered, especially as an adult, especially in our political and social climate, I've always wondered how you were able to come in and deal with such diversity. And at that time, when we were not such a multifaceted, multicultural society, it wasn't as accepted. How are you able to come in and deal with us, the kids of the quote unquote projects, without any preconceived notions or ideas of what we were or weren't going to be?
I don't really know. I'm not really sure how to answer. We didn't have, where I grew up, a predominantly white, small town. We didn't have that kind of diversity, nor did we have any place that we called the projects. It was a housing complex, and that's where I went. And people are people, and kids are kids. We all have hearts. We all have souls.
Yeah.
And there's a difference to be embraced in all people, I guess. I don't know. It was nothing that I ever had to struggle to handle. It just was.
It just was, and I wish that I could transpose your energy and spirit and attitude about that onto everyone, because for the listeners, Terry treated us just like she said. It just was. I never, ever once. And as kids, you have a discernment for people that are around you, and you know if someone's good or what you deem as bad. And there was never a moment that I just didn't completely trust Terry. And from what I gather in talking to some contemporaries and friends, that was a pervasive feeling. Everyone kind of felt that Terry was there. She was on our side, and she was our advocate in many ways. And we'll talk about that more coming up. And that's truly how I felt. I never felt like you were judging us, as was often done by others. I just felt like you genuinely cared for us. You took the time to interact with us. Was there ever a time, though, I have to ask, where you did notice a difference in regards to race?
I have to say, in response to that as I went on in my time in the Keys, I did hear things about people who lived at Eastwind and different things, and I just never saw it. It was a place for me that felt so much like home and so safe. And there were a couple of times where, for me, it was I would hear you speak about being, or all of you speak about being maybe the only black child or the only Hispanic child among some white people, and I never felt that until one day walking through the back end of the complex. We had gone over to the grocery store. I'm sure I had gone over there for candy, maybe.
Probably.
And was walking back through, and there were several people on the basketball court, and that one moment I became aware that I was the only white person there. And it fleeted for a moment, but I thought, is this what it feels like to be out and to just look around and be the only white person or the only black person among a group of people? And there was one other that did stand out to me, and
Right.
but I was never afraid.
Clearly, it showed. You couldn't have been.
Yeah.
We were always all over you, Terry. I felt like we never left you alone.
It wasn't that great. I loved it. And then there was one time where we were doing some kind of party, which we did like to have parties.
Yes, we did.
We were doing some kind of a party, big to do, again on the basketball court, the center of our existence. And my, at the time, boyfriend was invited to come along as a guest, and he brought his parents who were visiting from out of town. And when they drove in, I went up to meet them, and we did travel, Monette, as a group. We all the kids and I, we moved as a group. When
Yes.
I moved, there were like 12 kids moving with me.
Always.
At the same time. We just kind of moved.
Yeah.
And we moved over to them, and he introduced me to his parents by saying, "This is my girlfriend, Terry. She sees no color." And I don't think my heart had ever smiled as big as it did that day. It was the biggest compliment anyone had ever given me.
And it was the truth. And I just can so testify to that. It was the truth. I didn't know that because I was a child. I wasn't aware of those interactions. But as we were speaking now, I thought, wow, that makes perfect sense. And it's the feeling. It's one of the reasons that I was so happy to connect with you again, because sometimes you don't get to say thank you to someone who showed you how you should be treated, just like everybody else, just like a regular kid. And I use some of the methods I saw you employ while dealing with all of us to deal with the children that I ended up teaching later in life too. We are all just kids. We all have a heart. We all have a soul. Hashtag Terry. That's a Terry quote. We all have a heart and soul. And you demonstrated that for us. But something that I wasn't aware of is that you were acting as more than just our Terry. We kind of were onerous of you, our Terry. You were kind of the unofficial community liaison. Can you tell us what that looked like and how that came to be?
That came to be at that time on the second year of the grant. The grant was written for 2 years. And at the second year of the grant, I swapped my other job. I was working 2 full-time jobs, my one at Eastwind and also my one in food service. But I had swapped over